Hello, good evening. Welcome back to another Classic Comics live stream. Again, I'm going to be taking a look at one of the episodes of the original Star Trek series, both the episode itself and the behind the scenes making of the episode. So this week, the episode is going to be The Devil in the Dark. A personal favorite, certainly. I think it's one of the more beloved episodes in the series. And as always, I will be reading from Mark Cushman's book, These Are the Voyages, for behind the scenes information. And we'll just go ahead and get into it here. So this is from NBC's press release for February 14th, 1967. A distress call from a mining station on an ore-rich planet leads the Enterprise crew to an encounter with a space creature who has been thwarting delivery of critically needed metals in The Devil in the Dark on the NBC television network colorcast of Star Trek. Captain Kirk and Mr. Spock join Chief Engineer Vandenberg on the planet outpost Janus 6 in a desperate attempt to stem the harassment of their important mining operation by a Horta, a strange and apparently indestructible life form. While tracking the Horta through a maze of subterranean shafts, the men are isolated during a cave-in, and Kirk finds himself face to face with the creature. The Horta, who is capable of moving through solid rock, kills without warning and seemingly without purpose. Now it has taken components needed to keep the life support systems on Janus 6 working, forcing Kirk and the miners to race against a ticking clock as they search for the missing equipment. As with Arena, the story offers a study of bigotry and fear and gives challenge to the meaning of monster. And hello, J Rocker. Thank you for stopping by, sir. Good to see you here. Okay, so The Devil in the Dark represents a rare and early instance in science fiction where a monster is transformed from a thing to be feared unexpectedly and into an object of Kirk's and the viewer's empathy. An exceptional moment in Gene Coombs' script comes when Spock is in telepathic contact with the Horta. That scene itself, depending on one's tastes and patience, plays as either brilliant or overly long and somewhat silly. But the cleverness is in the words. Kuhn has the Horta choose when describing its enemies, the humans. Vandenberg and his men have already called the Horta a devil and repeatedly referred to it as a monster. In turn, the Horta itself accuses the humans of being both monsters and devils. Once again, Jonathan Swift has been effectively channeled through a writer-producer of Star Trek, albeit a different Gene this time. The humans and the Horta, seeing one another as killers and thereby blinded by prejudice and fear, are determined to annihilate the other. They could have just as easily been written as Americans and Russians, or blacks and whites, or Republicans and Democrats, or even male versus female. Except NBC would never put the show on the air in 1967. Flesh and blood people versus a silicon and rock creature, however, was more acceptable for the American airwaves of this era. This episode broke new ground, enlightened its audience, and is rightfully considered to be a classic. Nonetheless, The Devil in the Dark is dated and flawed. It is claustrophobic. Well, I don't know. I think that makes sense. It's all mostly taking place underground in tunnels, so it makes sense it would be claustrophobic. I don't really see that as an issue. The smooth stage floors in these tunnels are a distraction. Yeah, I mean they are kind of. The matte painting of the underground complex is so clearly a drawing that it draws attention to itself, as does the absurdly simplistic charts and maps that decorate Vandenberg's office. Well, I mean, it was the limitations of the time. And yeah, by today's standards, certainly they don't look good. Beyond the cosmetics, there is sloppiness in the plotting and execution. The illogic of Vandenberg, after losing 50 men to the monster, to continue to post sentries deep in the tunnels, not in pairs, but on their own, each to become yet another victim.
or why these miners have no replacement parts for their antique 20-year-old fission power reactor and its circulating pump, which, if it breaks, will result in the death of everyone on the planet long before help could possibly arrive. Yeah, I mean that is an obvious plot hole. Or how Vandenberg's men who fear the Horta are in the end willing to charge it manned only with clubs. Yeah, that's another thing, is they establish that standard phasers don't even hurt it. But at the end of the episode, they've got like clubs and stuff, and they're like, "Yeah, we'll kill," like they're extras from a Universal, one of those old Universal monster movies with pitchforks or something. The Enterprise crew doesn't behave any more sensibly. Knowing 50 men have died, Kirk allows his security team to go in search of the creature and even splits them up, leaving one man searching alone to be the next to die. Yeah, I can't argue with that. And Kirk and Spock hold a portion of the recently severed hide of the hoarder in their bare hands, without Spock even taking a tricorder reading first to be sure it is not covered in the corrosive acid, which has already killed the numerous men and burned holes through metal and solid rock. Yeah, I mean, I think that was just kind of a time thing. It strains credulity to imagine how this immensely heavy rock creature, which we only see scurry across the stage floor, can leap into the air and pounce on a man twice his own height, or clear its way through a hole made in a wall that when that hole doesn't even reach to the ground, or how it makes off with the circulatory pump without any hands. That's a good point. Yeah, I mean, how does it carry the pump around? It doesn't have any hands, without pockets or without a buggy. The Devil in the Dark, while an important episode with a profound message, is far from perfect. But with thought provoking material such as this, who needs perfection? Okay. All right, let's go ahead and we'll get into the episode itself here. Okay, so the Enterprise arrives at Janus 6 in response to a distress call. Janus 6 is a Pergium mining installation. Kirk, Spock, and McCoy. And of course, we have this sequence here at the beginning where one of the miners gets killed by the Horta. And this is actually only the second time that an episode has started and it doesn't start on board the Enterprise. They did this also with The Conscience of the King, which was the first one, and this is only the second. So the Enterprise responds to a distress call and comes to Janus 6, which is this Pergium mining installation. Kirk, Spock, and McCoy beam down to meet with Mr. Vandenberg, the administrator of the mining operation. Now, Vandenberg tells Kirk that in the last year they opened up a new level in the mine, and then they started having problems with equipment being sabotaged. And then the men started turning up dead. It seems there's some sort of creature roaming these lower levels, killing the miners. In recent months, the deaths have been occurring at higher levels, with the most recent death being just 2 days ago. In each case, the victim's body was burnt to a crisp, according to Vandenberg. So McCoy requests to see the remains, and then he leaves to inspect them. Kirk, yeah, and also we've got the spherical object that is on Vandenberg's desk, which you see here. And Spock takes an acute interest in it, asking what it is, and Vandenberg explains that it's a silicon nodule, and he says that the lower tunnels are full of them. Now, Kirk requests plans for the network of mining tunnels, and Vandenberg agrees to provide them. McCoy returns and he tells Kirk that the victims weren't burnt in the conventional sense. The state of the remains suggests some sort of chemical corrosion, as if the victims were dropped into a vat of acid. While Kirk and Vandenberg are discussing these matters, another miner gets attacked and killed. Then an alarm goes off, alerting Vandenberg and Kirk and the others. And when they arrive on the scene, they find the remains of the miner, who is quite dead. And when you say remains, I mean, you're talking somewhat figuratively here. It's basically just, maybe some ashes and a few bits of bone or something. But another problem is that this has happened outside the power reactor, and they discover that the creature has burned its way into the reactor and has stolen a circulating pump. Now, without this circulating pump, the reactor is eventually going to overheat and melt down, poisoning the planet. Not to mention that without it, eventually the life support systems are going to break down, and they'll have no air to breathe. And the miners have no replacement for these pump, and they have no suitable replacements on the Enterprise either. Now, Kirk calls Scotty and asks him if he can jury rig some sort of replacement. And Scotty says he thinks he can, but he can't guarantee it'll work for very long, more than maybe a couple of days at the most. Kirk tells him to get on it right away. Vandenberg isn't pleased, but Kirk says they will try to find the original pump before the replacement fails. And yeah, if I'm Kirk, I'm kind of like, why don't you have a replacement for this pump? If this pump fails, then the reactor fails, and you would all die. And and it's going to happen long before help could arrive. When you don't have a ship to take you to escape on and get out of here, so why don't you have a replacement? Don't complain to me. Okay, so now later, Spock notes that the creature took the one piece of equipment that the mine simply can't operate without, suggesting that the creature took that piece of equipment deliberately. And Kirk asks Spock, why now? Why is this creature killing people now? The mine's been there for over 50 years, and there were no incidents or deaths until recently. Spock admits that he doesn't know, but he suggests that the creature may not be carbon based, but instead possibly another element such as silicon, which would explain why their sensors are unable to detect the creature. Now, McCoy dismisses this idea, but Kirk agrees that it is possible. He and Spock also agree that the creature might not be affected by their standard phasers and that the miners are armed with, and orders Spock to send down a contingent of security armed with Type 2 phasers. Kirk then observes that Spock seems fascinated by the silicon nodule on Vandenberg's desk. When Kirk asks Spock if he thinks they're connected to the creature, Spock declines to speculate, noting that he has already provided Dr. McCoy with enough amusement for one day already. So Scotty gets the pump in place, but tells Kirk it's probably not going to work for very long. Then Kirk meets with their security team, telling the leader of the security team, Lieutenant Commander Giotto, the chief of security, to put their phasers on maximum, and sends them to the 23rd level where the silicon nodules were first found. While searching for the creature, Spock adjusts his tricorder to detect silicon-based life forms. Then one of the red shirts gets killed, plot twist. Kirk and Spock hear his screams and they come running to find his charred remains. They find a tunnel that was made recently, and then the creature emerges from the nearby tunnel. It approaches Kirk and Spock, and they open fire on it. The creature then flees down another tunnel. The security chief arrives, and Kirk tells them that they saw the creature and wounded it. They then find a fragment of the creature sheared off by their phasers. Kirk tells the security chief to warn his men, noting that there's nothing more dangerous than a wounded animal. And now Spock says that he has scanned 100 miles in every direction and can only detect one creature. Spock also says there are thousands of tunnels, too many for this one creature to have made on its own. He then speculates that this creature may be the last of its kind, and argues that killing it would be a crime against science. Kirk says that their priority is to get the mine working and that the creature will have to be killed. Okay, so later Kirk tells security that the creature can be wounded, but it requires sustained phaser fire. Spock then tells them where the creature was last seen and tells them to try and surround the creature in hopes of taking it alive. Kirk belays that order, telling them to shoot to kill. And I would note in this scene here, one of the security team is Eddie Paskey here, who I've talked about previously. And of course, he is Shatner's like lighting double. And he's one of those background figures that pops up on the bridge a lot. He played, was it Lieutenant Kelly, I think was his character. Although most of the time he isn't named, he's just sort of there. So he dismisses the security team, telling them all to shoot to kill. Kurt then tells Spock he should go assist Scotty with the reactor pump. Spock says that he's of little use there because he doesn't know much about pumps or about reactors. But Kirk counters that the two of them being in the same location is an unnecessary risk since they're the first and second officer, or captain and first officer, excuse me. Hello, left-handed Jedi. So many red shirts, so little time. Yeah, there's a lot of red shirts in this one. Plenty of them, and yeah, a few of them do meet their maker. And thank you for being here, by the way. Appreciate it. Spock counters that the odds of them both being killed are approximately 2,228.7 to 1. And Kirk admits that those are long odds and grudgingly allows Spock to remain. Scotty then calls and says that the replacement pump has given out, and they have about 10 hours before the reactor goes critical. Kirk orders that the miners begin evacuating, but Vandenberg and a few others elect to remain behind and help search for the creature. Now, while searching for the creature, Kirk and Spock come across a pair of tunnels and decide to split up and check them separately. And clearly Kirk never played D&D or he'd know that you never ever split the party up. So Kirk comes to a cavern and finds lots of the silicon nodules. He tells Spock, but just as he's speaking to Spock, there is a cave in, and it's caused by the creature. You can kind of see it in the foreground here. Um, Kirk somehow doesn't see it. I don't know how. Kirk is uninjured by the cave in, but then he is confronted by the creature. He keeps the creature at bay by brandishing his phaser. The creature doesn't attack, but it won't allow him to leave either. Then Spock calls, telling Kirk that he has detected the creature nearby. And of course, Kirk then tells Spock, "Oh, yes, it's 10 feet right in front of me." And Spock urges him to kill it, but Kirk hesitates. Then the creature reveals the wound that it received earlier. Spock arrives and joins them, noting that the cavern is filled with the silicon nodules. Spock then attempts a mind meld with the creature. During the mind meld, Spock cries out in pain, and afterwards he tells Kirk that the creature is in tremendous agony. Then the creature burns a message into the nearby rocks, apparently having gained an understanding of English from the mind meld, rather conveniently. The message is "No kill I." Spock tells Kirk that the creature calls itself a Horta and is quite intelligent. Kirk asks Spock to reestablish contact and try to get the creature to return the reactor pump. But Spock says that the creature has no reason to return the pump and every reason to want them all gone. Kirk then contacts McCoy and tells him to come down to their location. Then he tells Spock to attempt another mind meld to learn why it started killing the miners. While Spock mind melds, Kirk calls Lieutenant Commander Giotto and tells him to allow Kirk into the tunnel while keeping the miners out. McCoy arrives, and Kirk tells McCoy to tend to the Horta's wounds. McCoy says, "I'm a doctor, not a bricklayer." He then asks Spock where the reactor pump is, and Spock tells him that it's further down the tunnel in what he calls the Chamber of the Ages, and tells Kirk to weep for the murdered children. Outside the tunnel, the miners who know the creature is in the tunnel are angry and looking for revenge. They want to attack the creature, but security won't let them through. In the Chamber of the Ages, Kirk finds fragments of thousands of the silicon nodules as well as the reactor pump. Kirk realizes that the nodules are eggs, and the miners must have broken into the Horta's hatchery and inadvertently killed thousands of the Horta's young. Outside the tunnel, the miners overpower the security team and try to attack the creature. Kirk warns them not to, and then Spock explains what the Horta is. Apparently, every 50,000 years, all of the species die except for one that remains to tend the eggs until they hatch. Which, I don't know, as a survival strategy, it seems kind of dicey, or depending on this one creature for the fate of your whole race. I mean, what if there's an accident? What if there's an earthquake in a cave in? I don't know. I mean, I don't know that it would have any natural enemies, but still, it seems like that's quite a gamble to risk on one life form for the fate of your whole race or species. Now, outside the tunnel, oh, sorry, I already got that. So Vandenberg is dismayed at the prospect of thousands of hordas hatching and roaming through the mines, but Kirk notes that the hordas are natural miners, and perhaps they can reach an agreement with the hordas that will allow the mines to be more efficient and profitable than they were before, with the hordas doing the mining and then the humans just following along after them and collecting the minerals they expose. However, Spock notes that the Horta is wounded and it may die. But then McCoy says that it won't die. He tells Kirk that he requested some quick setting concrete from the Enterprise and has used it to close up the Horta's wounds, and he thinks the creature is going to survive. Kirk then asks Spock to meld with the Horta again and explain their proposition. He asks Spock if the Horta will agree to it, and Spock says that the proposition is logical, and the Horta has a very logical mind, which Spock notes that after spending so much time with humans, he finds most refreshing. Now, later, as the Enterprise is departing, Vandenberg calls the Enterprise and tells them that the eggs have hatched thanks to the Hortas, they've already found new Pergeum deposits. He says that the Hortas aren't so bad once you get used to it. Spock then says that during the mind meld, the mother Horta said the same thing about humans. She found their appearance revolting, but thought that perhaps she could get used to them. McCoy then asks if she commented on Spock's ears, and Spock tells them that she seemed to find them the most appealing humanoid feature. Kirk asks Spock if he's sure about that, and Spock assures him that the Horta is a very intelligent creature with impeccable taste. Kirk then observes that Spock is becoming more human all the time, and Spock walks away saying that he has no need to stand here being insulted. And the episode ends there. And yeah, this is an A+ episode. Absolutely. It's as it says in the book, it's considered a classic for a good reason. It kind of signifies really the heart of what Star Trek is about, of going out into the universe and then trying to find alien life, strange new life, but then trying to reach an understanding and learning more about it rather than just saying it's a monster and killing it. Okay. And Left-Handed Jedi says this was one of my favorite episodes of TOS. Yeah, I suspect it's probably going to be that for a lot of folks because I mean, it is just so good. It's just really, really well done. It's a brilliant concept and just a tremendous twist. It's interesting, and they talk about this in the book, which I'll get into, but they talk about how, because this was largely, this was written by Gene Coon, I should mention. directed by Joseph Pevney, written by Gene Kuhn, and it really shows his hand in a way that, um, how they deal with the monster, or the, well, I shouldn't say monster, with the creature, and they compare that with, say, the man trap and the salt monster, the salt sucker in that one, and how they deal with that one very differently, and at the end of the episode, Kirk is kind of wistful about it because that was also the last of its kind. And he has that line at the end where he says, I was just thinking about the buffalo, and obviously kind of lamenting that the creature had to be killed, but they also never doubt that it has to be killed and never really try to reach an understanding with it or try and figure out its motives or anything like that. They just basically see it as something, a threat that has to be eliminated. And that's very different to what happens here. And Left-Handed Jedi says that and the Planet Killer are top of my list. Yeah, that's another one I think just about everybody loves. The Doomsday Machine, which I'll cover eventually. That's what, second season. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about the making of this episode here. So, The Devil in the Dark came about as a result of a Hungarian immigrant turned Hollywood stuntman who began his career dressed as apes in the circus. Janos Prohaska had an arrangement with Star Trek. If he ever came up with a creature the producers liked, they would not only rent it from him, but would also pay him to be the man inside the suit. And Jay Rocker says Barry Russo, who played the head of security, was also Commander Wesley in The Ultimate Computer. Yes, he was. Yeah, I will get to that. But yeah, and actually, I meant at some point in I forgot to do it. But I was going to make some joke while I was going through the episode about Captain Dunsel, but I never got around to doing it. Give my regards to Captain Dunsel. As the January 25th, 1969 issue of TV Guide, or in that uh, issue, Prohaska explained, and I think, he was Hungarian, so I think he's kind of speaking in kind of broken English here. He says, first TV series I do is Riverboat. It is about a traveling circus, and I played the chimp. But then I got type rolled. People keep telling me, thank you, we don't need no chimps today. Then Ivan Tors put me in Man in the Challenge. I played a gorilla. And I saw they needed a bear, so I make bear. Then when monster shows start, I start to make monsters. Regarding the Horta, Prohaska used a similar looking alien for The Probe, the final episode of The Outer Limits. After some alterations and hidden inside the costume, um, Gene Kuhn recalled Prohaska crawling into his office to make a presentation. Dorothy Fontana remembers it happening outdoors, however. Quote, Janos asked Gene Roddenberry, Gene Kuhn, Robert Justman, and I to look at his proposal outside the office building in the studio street. He had backed off a bit to hide the blob creature, but then he brought it up to us as we stood in the street. Robert Justman says, suddenly the blob skittered around the corner, making straight for us. Then it stopped curiously, backed away, and rotated in place. Fontana added, the creature backed and bobbed a bit, then ran up, paused, and then left a skeletal chicken in the street as it skittered off. Justman and Kuhn said it was a large egg-like object that the creature left behind. Roddenberry claimed it was not, and that the idea for the egg came later. Justman said he was dumbfounded. He had watched this thing give birth. Fontana said, quote, we loved it. Janos got up and turned to us as we stood in the street, and the Horta was born. Interviewed in the late 1960s, Kuhn said, quote, I fell in love with it, then put a hold on the delightful glob and sat down and wrote The Devil in the Dark in 4 days. Knowing Kuhn, the script notably was written in 4 days, but even a producer of Star Trek had to play by the rules and work within the system. A treatment came first. Um, uh, Roddenberry remembered the origin of the Devil in the Dark, or at least the part about the egg, differently. Quote, Let me tell you about the Devil in the Dark. Gene Coon had written an episode that had a planet in it where miners were mining things, and he had created something that I didn't like. It was a story of them discovering large nodules, and he just made them valuable because they had some chemical composition or something we needed. It was basically a story of greed. And I said, Gene, I don't like your story. I would like the story much better if these nodules were created by creatures and they were eggs. And he said, Jesus, Gene, that's a marvelous idea. So basically, everyone else remembers it as the egg being Coon's idea, except for Roddenberry, who remembers it being his idea. Why am I not surprised? One thing certainly different in the first story outline as opposed to the episode was its beginning. The Enterprise does not respond to an emergency call from the miners, but instead limps its way to the mineral rich planet after being damaged by a meteor storm and needing materials to make repairs. A plot device that was similar to that originally used in Mudd's Women and more recently in early drafts of A Taste for Armageddon. Upon arriving at Janus 6, Kirk discovers there is no salvation for him in the Enterprise. The mining operation had been shut down due to the attacks of the Horda. The stakes for Kirk, therefore, are greater and much more personal. And also, I guess we should point out that, of course, the creator of the creature, of course, is named Janos, but of course, it's the first letter is J. So I think in Hungarian it would be Janos, but in English you might actually pronounce it Janos. And of course, Janus 6. So they named the planet after the designer of the suit or the creature. Robert Justman kept his memo to Kuhn short. Okay, I'll just skip that part. That's not important. So, otherwise, Justman was very enthusiastic regarding Kuhn's latest creation and wrote, I am very pleased. Please write the screenplay quickly. Since they were still waiting for a shootable draft of Harlan Ellison's The City on the Edge of Forever, as well as Barry Trivers' Portrait of Black and White and Paul Schneider's Tomorrow the Universe, or any draft at all of Theodore Sturgeon's Amok Time, which were all in various stages of development, Justman was desperate for something, anything really, that he could schedule for production. Kuhn, needing NBC approval before advancing to screenplay, chose to take one more day and revise his outline. Regarding the setup for the story, which Kuhn rather fancied as is, he ignored Justman's note and left it for Stan Robertson to accept or reject. Upon reading the revised outline, Robertson echoed Justman's thinking, saying, excellent story, Gene. However, I think we should have a different opening, since this one is somewhat similar to the others we have had. Other than that, the remainder of the story is totally different from anything we have to date. Good luck on the script. It was everything Robertson had been asking for. It was a planet show with a monster and a message. And now, pleasing Robertson even more, the story would begin on a planet and not with a shot of the Enterprise, a device that the NBC man argued was already becoming redundant. This, in fact, was only the second story to begin away from the Enterprise, the first being Conscience of the King. Kuhn begrudgingly jettisoned the idea of the Enterprise damaged in a meteor storm and needing repairs. The urgency now had to do with the Pergeum mine on Janus 6 desperately being needed on dozens of planets to maintain life support systems. Kuhn wrote his first and second draft teleplays in December, within days of one another. There was a secret behind his speed at the typewriter. Kuhn's secretary, Andy Richardson Kindred, said, quote, he liked amphetamines. And that really contributed to him grinding his teeth and being grim looking. He was under a lot of pressure a lot of the time, but that's how he was able to write The Devil in the Dark so fast. Yeah, I guess being on meth will do that. With such an urgent need for a new script to go before the cameras, Kuhn's first draft of Devil, dated December 19th, was immediately bound in yellow covers and designated as the first draft teleplay, even though no one else on the staff, neither Roddenberry nor Fontana, had even taken a look at it. Left-handed Jedi says he was tripping. No, I mean I don't know if you trip really on meth. That's more like LSD or something. But yeah, he was on something. He was tweaking, I guess. Something different in this version, as opposed to the final shooting script, is that the Horta steals a control rod from the reactor, not a circulating pump. Kuhn had done his homework in learning that what a control rod was, and that it was used in nuclear reactors to control the rate of fission of uranium and plutonium, thereby preventing a power generator from becoming a nuclear bomb. And this draft of the script, the theft of the control rod by the hoarder, creates an immediate danger of an explosion that will kill all the humans on the planet and leave the Enterprise crew nowhere to escape once the damaged ship is unable to maintain a safe orbit. Kuhn's ticking clock is a loud one. DeForest Research, however, had issues with the plot contrivances. Among the coverage notes sent to Kuhn by Joan Pierce at DeForest Research, if the Horde is intelligent and understands the operation of the reactor, it seems unlikely that she would steal a control rod, thereby risking an explosion which might kill her and destroy her eggs. It would be more likely that she would shut down the reactor and then steal a part, thereby making the environment unlivable for the humans without endangering herself or the eggs. Pierce was right, and Kuhn's next draft changed the control rod to a circulation pump. In doing so, the ticking clock was somewhat muted, and the change did nothing to help with the problem as to why neither the miners nor the Enterprise have no replacement parts. The explanation that the fission reactor is 20 years old, therefore too much of an and therefore too antique to repair, seems foolish. It was a contrivance that served the story but made little real sense. And also, Joan Pierce added, there have been serious scientific investigations on the possibility of intelligent life based on a silicon chemical cycle. Silicon is one element capable of building the complicated molecules necessary for life processes. But silicon based life would only develop and be sustained under conditions of extreme heat, perhaps an environment comparable to that prevailing on the planet Mercury. It could not possibly exist in an oxygen atmosphere. In the presence of oxygen, the silicon compounds would undergo spontaneous chemical transformation. That is, they would burn up. Kuhn did not have the luxury of time to completely rethink his story or put it through a major overhaul. Justman was standing on his desk waiting for a draft, so he instigated a compromise. He added in a few lines of dialogue. McCoy says silicon based life is physiologically impossible. And that was, where was that scene? Here we go. Especially in an oxygen atmosphere. Spock retorts, may I point out, Doctor, the atmosphere of these caverns is artificially created to support our form of life. It may be the creature can exist for brief periods in such an atmosphere before retreating to its own environment. McCoy, speaking on behalf of DeForest Research, says, I still think you're imagining things. Kirk, making Gene Kuhn's argument to Pierce, interjects, you may be right, Bones, but it's something to go on. Believability factors aside, Gene Kuhn, with his two scripts, the other being Arena, had redefined the Starship Enterprise's mission. Herb Solow said, quote, Star Trek was a series that dealt with non-human characters being treated as human beings. At first, before we hired Gene Kuhn, we did have episodes where we landed on a planet, and if Kirk didn't like the people, he'd just shoot them. I think that's a bit of an exaggeration. Kuhn came in and said, hey, hold it. Why do we do that? Why don't we go in and find out what they want and why they're here? Maybe they have the right to be here and we don't. I really think that doing that was an amazing approach to television back then in the mid 60s. In this respect, The Devil in the Dark demonstrates how Kuhn would have handled the man trap, another story about the last of its kind. In the latter, Kirk is determined to destroy the monster. In Devil, Kirk cools down faster and seems more interested in discovering why the creature has been killing. David Gerald, whose script The Trouble with Tribbles was filmed in season 2, said, I would have to point to The Devil in the Dark as being the best episode Gene Coon ever wrote, because it really gets to the heart of what Star Trek was. Here you have a menace, but once you understand what the creature is and why it's doing what it does, it's not really menacing at all. We end up learning more about appropriate behavior for ourselves out of learning to be compassionate, tolerant, and understanding. To me, in many ways, Gene Coon was the heart and soul of Star Trek. Roddenberry liked Devil in the Dark enough to want some credit too, saying, quote, Gene Coon and I, we thought on the same lines constantly, and that was all part of the Star Trek tradition of our attitude toward races. Up until that time, we hadn't really decided what our point of view on other races would be. That episode laid out the whole rule of treatment of others. This was really putting us together a series and beginning to state what the series was. Kuhn handled his own rewriting, creating a final draft screenplay on December 22nd, followed by various pages of revision on December 28th and January 6th, and even on January 16th, the day the filming began. A final set of revised pages came on January 18th, when the production schedule would be rocked by the sudden death of William Shatner's father. Scenes originally written for the briefing room on the Enterprise had to be changed to work in Vandenberg's office on Janus 6 in the interest of saving time. Fontana confirmed that The Devil in the Dark was a rare case at Star Trek where the writer credited on the screen was actually the only one to work on the script. Quote, nobody touched that one, she said. I had no input on it whatsoever. It was Gene Coon all the way. If he confirmed with Roddenberry about it, I don't know of it. Gene just did that, and I thought it was a great script. Classic episode status notwithstanding, the script actually reads better than the episode plays. Some elements which could have been very effective were either not filmed or not included in the final edit. In the script, it is clear that the Horta is watching the humans, especially Kirk and Spock. It recognizes Kirk as in charge by the way he points and speaks to the other humans who nod and appear to comply with his wishes. The Horta therefore targets Kirk and arranges for the cave in that forces the leader of the humans into a showdown. Also made clear in the script, the creature quickly learns that Spock's tricorder is not its friend, and that the device can somehow detect when it is hiding nearby. When the creature hears the tricorder sound, it scurries away. The only story element of this type that made it into the episode was when the Horta, after being injured, knows the phaser is its enemy and cowers each time Kirk points the weapon in its direction. But in the filmed enemy, but in the filmed episode, it is not made clear why the Horta does not flee at this moment. The script, however, tells us explicitly. The Horta holds its ground facing Kirk and his phaser, risking further injury and perhaps death to protect its eggs. The Devil in the Dark was supposed to be episode 25, followed on the production schedule by This Side of Paradise. And that's how it has been listed in perhaps every published or posted account, as well as in the home video and DVD sequencing. The official records say differently. Matt Jeffries needed more time to design the special sets required, while Kuhn and Justman needed more time to make a switch of directors. Quote, the first script I was sent was Devil in the Dark, said Ralph Sininsky. And Ralph Sininsky directed This Side of Paradise. And I talked about that in my last stream, where he was originally given Devil in the Dark, but then kind of at the last minute, they kind of switched it. And they gave him This Side of Paradise instead. And initially, he was disappointed because he really liked the Devil in the Dark script. But after he filmed the episode and everything, he felt like it all kind of worked out for the best. Sininsky was a newcomer to Star Trek, and as Devil entered into its planning stages, Kuhn and Jessman got nervous. Joseph Pevney, they believed, was far better suited for the ambitious production. Pevney had already directed, one or two episodes at this point. Pevney kept getting tough assignments. The results here, as with Pevney's previous assignment, A Taste of Armageddon, are mixed. Yeah, I believe this is his third episode. There are nice touches, like the shots of the Horta sliding through tunnels, leaving behind a cloud of steam from the corrosive elements. Other moments, including some questionable acting choices, the lighting and photography of the matte paintings, the set design, costuming, and even the geography of the holes made by the Horta, Horta, all things in which the director gives input could and should have been better. Yeah, but also they kind of made this thing in a hurry, you know. As they say in here, they really needed an episode, any episode, and they just had to get this thing going as quick as possible. You know, if they had had more time, more lead up time, they may have done better on some of those elements. Ken Lynch, let me find him, find a good shot of him here. Well, I guess I don't have a good face shot of him here, but he's the guy that plays Vandenberg. There you go. He was 46. He had worked prolifically in TV and films throughout the 50s, 60s, and 70s with more than 200 appearances. Described as the perfect Irish cop, he often played that sort of role, including recurring roles on 4 different shows: The Plain Clothesman from 1949, Checkmate in 1961, Arrest and Trial in 1964, and Honey West from 1966. The latter filming around the same time as this episode. Barry Russo, and as Jay Rocker noted earlier, he is also he's the last one in line there. Maybe I can get a better shot of him. There we go. Oh, hey, Adega. Hello, sir. No problem. Thank you for stopping by anyway. I know you're busy. Well, we're all busy, Lord knows. Um, but yeah, so Barry Russo, he will appear again in The Ultimate Computer playing Commodore Wesley. He had acted in a 1958 episode of Have Gun with Travel that was written by Gene Roddenberry. Often billed as Bill Duke, he was a prominent guest player in dozens of TV series, including The Outer Limits. For 2 seasons, just prior to Star Trek, he was a regular in a soap called The Young Marrieds. Never heard of that one. Russo, whose performance is spot on, returned to play Wesley in The Ultimate Computer. Brad Weston, cast as Appel. Um, and I don't think I have a picture of him here. Let me see. Oh, hey, J Man. 10 of 10. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I gave it an A plus. Just about to play D&D. Cool. And wanted to say hello, man. Thank you for stopping by, man. I appreciate it. Um, I hope the session goes well. Have fun. I'd like to be playing more myself, but I don't have time these days. Okay. So yeah, Appel. I was looking for Appel. Here he is. So he's the guy in the purple here. I think there. Maybe that's a better shot of him. Brad Weston was cast as Appel, the only miner to see the creature and live. He had also acted in Have Gun Will Travel, written by Roddenberry. It was one of his many appearances on that series. He was also often seen in 77 Sunset Strip and The Virginian. Roddenberry took notice of Appel and sent a memo to Joe DaGosta, the casting director, saying, "In The Devil in the Dark, I saw a young Fess Parker type character. I think his name was Weston, who was sort of second in command of the miners with the heavy set of hair. I'm interested in him. Can we talk about his background and ability?" Roddenberry was already thinking about adding a younger male actor to the regular cast in the hopes of strengthening Star Trek's teen appeal. Weston, in time, would be supplanted by Walter Koenig and his portrayal of Ensign Pavel Chekhov. Uh, I mean, I don't know. I don't mean to insult the guy, but somehow I don't think that this guy Weston would really do a lot to increase their appeal with teenagers, especially teenage girls, because the guy looks like he's what 40. You know, he's not exactly a guy you'd see on the cover of Tiger Beat or something. Um, Bill Elliott is the man who was killed at the beginning of the episode and was burned to a crisp in the teaser. Was 43 and had acted in Roddenberry's The Lieutenant. Um, Let me bring him up here. Oop, wrong thing. There we go. Come on. Come on. There he is. He often appeared in Alfred Hitchcock Presents, and from the same time period as Devil in the Dark, he appeared on Mission Impossible. So, principal photography began on Monday, January 16th, the day after the first Super Bowl, interestingly. Filming for Devil in the Dark began on stage 10, which had been dressed as at great expense to be a maze of caverns, augmented with tube-like tunnels made by the Horta. This gave Devil in the Dark a unique look. It also gave the production company many problems with which to contend. Joseph Pevney said, quote, "The primary problem was photographing the Horta. We had to put a glistening sheen on it, a kind of coating to make it stand away from the walls because everything was the same color. Then we exaggerated its motion as it moved so that the audience would be sure to see it." And let's see if I can find. There we go. And, and when I was a kid and I first saw it, I always thought it kind of looked like a pile of meatballs with spaghetti sauce on it. That's kind of how I imagined it. Let's see. Okay, so now on day three of filming, which was January 18th, filming was continuing at a brisk pace during the morning hours, but was suddenly interrupted by sad news. William Shatner received a phone call on the set from his mother and learned that his father had died unexpectedly while on a trip in Florida. Leonard Nimoy recalled, quote, "The producers told him to go ahead and leave, that they were making immediate arrangements to get him on the plane. But Bill just shook his head and gritted his teeth and said, quote, 'No, we're right in the middle of a scene and I'm going to finish it before I walk off the set.'" Dee, Kelly, and I both said, "It's okay, just leave, Bill. You can just go." But Bill was determined to finish the scene, though the tension on the set was almost unbearable as we all helplessly watched him struggle through it. It was a tough emotional afternoon, and there was really nothing we could do except remain close by. The flight Shatner was able to book wouldn't leave Los Angeles until that evening, and he preferred to stay busy working. Yeah, I know that feeling, unfortunately. He later admitted, "At that moment in time, the pain was awful. All through the scene, I kept having trouble with a particular line. My emotion was getting in the way and making me forget. The only thing I could recall perfectly and that I'll never forget is the closeness that my friend Leonard had toward me. Not just emotionally, but physically as well. I mean, I've seen film of elephants that support the sick and the dying with their bodies, and Leonard somehow seemed physically always close to me. Our cinematographer, Jerry Finnerman, whose father had also recently passed away, stayed close too. And together they kind of herded me around, assuring me that there were people close by in case I wanted to talk or just needed a friend." Pevney said, quote, "Shatner was very shaken then, and Leonard was very good to him at that point. He was with him all the time and able to give him great comfort." Curiously, just as Kirk only confided his feelings to McCoy or Spock and kept his inner torment hidden from the crew, Shatner chose not to discuss his sadness with many on the set. Kirk would stay strong in front of his crew, and Shatner did the same in front of his. Eddie Paskey said, quote, "We were doing the scene where Bill has us in the security detail all lined up in the caverns. And I was there, and I know Billy Blackburn was in there, and other regular stand-ins with some extras. We were basically lined up getting our orders from the captain, telling us what he expected from us. I didn't know at the time that his father had just passed away, and as far as I knew, no one else on the set knew it either. When he went out the door, I think it was Mike Glick, the assistant director, who informed us all what had been happening with Bill, that he was on his way to the airport. And I just thought, wow, here he is working his butt off for the show, even though personally he knew his father had just passed away. That spoke to his character and who Bill Shatner really is. I have a lot of respect for that, and I'll never forget it. He did a great job." Nimoy added, Finally, Bill finished the scene and left, and then we went on to shoot the scene where Spock approaches the Horta in order to make mental contact with it. Yeah, let me bring that up. I'm not sure if I have the right perspective on it. Okay, well, yeah, I don't think I have the right shot, unfortunately. Um, maybe maybe this shot though. I'm not sure if that's Shatner or not. But well, I'll just let Shatner or Nimoy tell it. Kirk is supposed to be standing and watching during this time when I'm mind melding with a Horta. We wound up filming across the back of Bill's double, Eddie Paskey, so that we got the wide master shots. Then the shot of me with the Horta later when Bill returned, and we got some close ups of Kirk from the front. So there are some shots where he's down here kneeling with the Horta, and Kirk is like standing like about here watching. And in those shots, it's actually Eddie Paskey and not Shatner because he had to leave. While this was happening, Kuhn was busy doing his final rewrite, changing a pair of briefing room scenes to now play out in Vandenberg's office. By not having to make a move from stage 10 to stage 9 and then back again as the schedule had it planned, the company saved a few hours. The latest page revisions had Devil in the Dark spend less time on board the Enterprise than any other episode of Star Trek, with the exception of the yet to be made All Our Yesterdays. On day 4, January 19th, Pevney shot the remaining scenes that did not involve Kirk, and then cast and crew were excused. That evening, Arena would have its broadcast premiere. On day 6, Shatner returned and production resumed. He would later admit that his father's death, the journey home for the funeral, the difficulties he was experiencing as a result of his failing marriage, and the exhausting work at Star Trek had left him depressed. His acting, however, did not suffer. Pevney said, quote, Shatner was very close to his father and it really shook him up, but he managed. He was much better than I was when my wife died. This was a very difficult show to do, Pevney said. Janos Prohaska, he probably lost 8 to 10 pounds a day just from crawling around in that suit. Day 7, Tuesday, January 24th, and still on stage 10, the company moved onto the set for Vandenberg's office, filming all the exposition scenes, including the two that were originally planned for the briefing room. And what I believe the day after that, they kind of wrapped up filming. With the extensive planet sets required and delays due to Shatner's absence, Devil in the Dark ran over Star Trek's mandated 6-day shooting schedule and maximum budget of $185,000 per episode. The final tally was 7 days of production, including one layoff day, and a budget of $192,863 spent. The first season's deficit was now up to $83,980. So the episode premiered on Thursday, March 9th, 1967. And in the first half hour from 8:30 to 9, it was second in the ratings behind Bewitched, as always. Never beat Bewitched. And then the second half hour from 9 to 9:30, it was second in the ratings again, this time behind the Thursday night movie. One member of the viewing audience on March 9th was not happy with what he was seeing. And that was Gene Roddenberry. He wrote to Gene Kuhn beginning on a positive note. I want to congratulate you on an excellent show, full of suspense, jeopardy, all the things that help bring us a mass audience, while maintaining good science fiction elements. The monster was treated very well and given beautiful and heartwarming characteristics toward the end. Roddenberry had placed quotation marks around the word monster for a reason. The word represented a pet peeve of his. His memo continued. We may have used the term monster a little too much at the beginning of the show, which would much prefer our people, highly trained astronauts of the future, well acquainted with thousands of forms of alien life, use terms like beings or creatures instead of monster. In regard to the cabin floors, he wrote, this could have used some painting modeled effect, as it seemed awfully shiny and new and stage like for an underground mining installation. It took away from the reality which the rough blasted walls gave us. Bijou Trimble, who was visiting the set of that episode as Roddenberry's guest, explained that the floors were made smooth for the needs of the Horta. She said, quote, "It would have been difficult for Janos to navigate the rocky floor. He stood about 6'4", but he could contort himself into the most amazing positions. He was down on his hands and knees constantly, so they needed it to be a smooth floor. He was having rough enough time as it was." Robert Jessman concurred, saying, "This was a 7-day production. We spent 6 of the 7 days in those tunnels and catacombs. That meant the man in the Horta costume spent 6 of those 7 days on his hands and knees, or elbows and knees, crawling, turning, pouncing, scurrying. And we were fond of him. We hoped to see him be able to stand up and walk again. And also, we wanted the stage floors flat because any one of the actors could have tripped and fallen, and any one of them could be a potential lawsuit." And Left-Handed Jedi says 180 grand back then comes out to 1.6 million adjusted for today. Okay, so that's the adjustment. All right, I wonder about that when I'm reading these. I'm always wondering what it is in today's dollars. So thank you for letting me know. So 180. So that's, I mean, that's an inflation rate of almost what, 1,000%, and a multiple of 10 times. Jesus. Okay. Others involved with the series were more taken by Devil in the Dark. This was one of William Shatner's 2 favorites. He said it was a terrific story, exciting, thought provoking, and intelligent. James Doohan picked this as a favorite as well. Leonard Nimoy also listed it as one of his favorites, saying that the theme was powerful as it dealt with racism and intercultural conflict, a fear of a person or thing that we do not know or understand. He remarked, "The Devil in the Dark illustrates beautifully how unreasoning fear begets violence, and how an attempt at understanding can benefit both sides in a conflict." Entertainment Weekly also chose Devil in the Dark as number 6 in their top 10 picks from the original series. Cinefantastique also listed Devil in the Dark as its on its top 10 list as well. Dorothy Fontana said, "That's the one that a lot of people remember very distinctly, the mother protecting her young, and it was a great show and a great script." In 1995, the renowned science fiction author Arthur C. Clarke said of this episode, quote, It impressed me because it presented the idea, unusual in science fiction then and now, that something weird and even dangerous need not be malevolent. That is a lesson that many of today's politicians have yet to learn." Okay, well, that will do it for Devil in the Dark. Now, the next episode is going to be Errand of Mercy, I think. Let me check here. Yeah, Errand of Mercy. Now, that will not be next week. I won't be streaming next week because I've got my National Guard unit drilling this weekend again. And so I probably won't have time to get the stream prepared. So hopefully in 2 weeks, I'll come back and be doing Errand of Mercy at that time. I would ask, please do like the stream before you leave. And I want to thank everyone who tuned in to watch, and everyone will tune in on a rewatch. Uh, please sub to the channel if you haven't, and check out some of my other videos while you're here. And as I said, I'll probably be back with another Trek Talk in 2 weeks. And until then, everyone, take care, and I'll see you then.